Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Strategic Source webinar on the topic of one platform that seamlessly connects your entire business. Good to have you joining us today. This is David, the session producer. Let's get underway. Here now is Doug Austin, CEO of Strategic Source. And Doug, take it away.
Well, welcome, everybody. We're glad you're here today and participating in this webinar. This is really probably the 12th webinar that we've done since June. We initiated the Innovative Supplier webinar series to really put some new creative and innovative ideas in front of our client base and prospects as well. There's a lot of changes going on in the industry. There's a lot of need right now in terms of cost reduction as dealers are challenged with light inventory levels. There's only so much that you can sell, and there's a big focus today on reducing costs. And so what we're trying to do is bring who we consider innovative suppliers that we have vetted, worked with. We've seen the financials. We're trying to bring those across a number of different expense categories. There are some suppliers that we brought on that really focus on audit and recovery. Meaning for those expenses that have already been paid, they may have been overpaid in some cases. And then finally, there are a number of new top-line revenue opportunities as well that you can bring in to drive top-line revenue for your organization. So as I said, we've been doing this since June. We've had tremendous participation with this. And today we're really pleased to have Pedram Fayel from Tekion and one of our clients, Scott Doobie, as well, that will be part of that panel to really speak to Tekion's DMS solution. We think we've heard nothing but positive reports on Tekion and really challenging kind of the legacy DMS providers out there, which we think is a good thing. Competition is a great thing in this country, and we want to see that prevail. But we've got a real strong, creative, and innovative supplier here today. So with that, I'm going to step away and turn it over to Pedram and Scott. Thanks very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pedram Fayed. I'm the Senior Director of Analytics here at Tekion, and I hope to be walking you through a presentation today that invokes some thought around the future of running automotive retail. Quick background on myself. I come from the retail automotive industry. I spent approximately 15 years in retail automotive here in Northern California, predominantly on the variable side of the business. In the last 6 years of my career, I served as a general manager. And so what I'm very excited to present to you is the one platform solution concept from Tekion is something that may resonate with most of you on this call, which is the fragmentation that we see in majority of our technology stack. So today's presentation will talk a lot about how potentially that data is going to be very valuable when it's under one roof. And I'm excited to also have as a co-host with me here, Scott Doobie, as one of our existing users of the product to help give us some feedback in what his experience has been.
Thank you, Pedram. Appreciate it.
Of course, no problem. Excellent. So one of the things that we thought we'd talk about a little bit on the surface is just Tekion as one platform that truly does connect your entire business. We've seen that, as I mentioned, the big challenge that in technology has been fragmentation. And in most of the cases, fragmentation has had significant expense issues, whether it's with onboarding employees to use multiple tools, understanding utilization of all these different tools. So one of the big value propositions for us has been unifying this data. And as Doug had mentioned, is that cost is certainly the forefront thought of managing the business. How do you run a more operationally efficient business? And so I hope to kind of convey to you from data, how do we look at that to run a more efficient model? In regards to the agenda for today, what we're going to talk a little bit about also is, from cost efficiency perspective, is something that we hear tossed around a lot is just the terminology of something called cloud hosted versus cloud native. We'll talk a little bit about market trends, where we see the market is headed in the future. Something, of course, that's very valuable is what is the value of data. And, of course, how do we accomplish a data-driven culture? And certainly last but not least, but the 5 key values to unlocking the potential of your data. So one thing that, when we first started the journey of trying to really present a true future-proof technology, we start with something that we discuss, which is something that we refer to as a product that is cloud-hosted. Cloud-hosted, I think for all of us, we've heard the terminology of the cloud as just a reference of being up in the cloud, which is defined as just the general internet space. And a lot of folks try to understand, well, I think all the software we use is in the cloud, which is true. But a cloud-hosted solution is essentially something that was built originally with an on-prem solution, which means that we have a hardware-dependent system. And hopefully for some of you, why we chose an old screen navigation system to be a reference point as a visual of this is that, cars that were equipped with navigation 10 years ago only served the purpose of a navigation system. And when we wanted to update them, the only thing we can do was purchase a DVD-ROM, for example. And these are the ways that we had to update. So, for example, today, majority of us that carry our smartphones, you've seen the newer vehicles that have come to market are now using what we call cloud-native strategies. Cloud-native is the ability that today, for example, the newer vehicles that have been shipped to your dealerships, it's really great. The navigation system alone is no longer a navigation system. What it is an interface that you plug your cell phone to, and all the different applications that you have on your phone are able to be used in the vehicle, agnostic to hardware. The other big value, of course, is that we're able to instantly deploy information. There's elasticity with lowered costs, and what that really means is you only use amount of technology that you're basically spinning up. And, of course, there's continuous updates. So it's really no different than your cell phone, that today one of the big values is that tomorrow if Apple pushes a new update on any of the applications you use in your device, when you plug it into your car, the car actually becomes a big benefactor of that. And unfortunately, the reason why over the left, a cloud-hosted solution is very costly to maintain and manage is we can't simply use our Apple CarPlay or listen to media audio devices on a navigation system because it was never intended to be used any different than it was initially built. And certainly, last but not least, is cloud-native solutions were built to integrate and share. So having an open API structure is very important. And, the important part where we try to really kind of connect the dots, because, of course, hopefully what we've been able to convey for you is cloud-hosted, and again, cloud-native, is cloud-native applications were actually built in the cloud. And so the benefits to maybe kind of connect these dots for you is a cloud-native solution can deliver continuous development. So that means developers can continue to make enhancements with instant feedback. Of course, this is very valuable because you also can instantly deploy information. Many of us who have used legacy DMS systems have seen that it takes months, years in some cases to see some major innovation come to final fruition. And in some cases, that fruition doesn't come through innovation of the actual DMS. It comes through the innovation of acquisition because the DMS system is built on a cloud-hosted system that limits its ability to update. And so now the only way the DMS can deliver more advanced features and values is through additional acquisitions of companies. And this is where we see the stacking of variety of companies, and as most of you have seen with the development of digital retailing, for example, as being one of the big products that was brought to market here in the last 18 months, it just becomes another product that sits on top of the system. Of course, the ability to also add new dealers, the efficiency of future growth. Cloud-native solutions are unencumbered with on-prem solutions, so it really enables you to be able to scale and grow. And then something we know that is very near and dear to and important to dealers is API integrations, allowing for seamless, integrations, whether it's through OEM, third-party applications and partnerships, and of course data, right? That we know that the value of the data really resides with our dealer partners, and we want them to have complete control and the ability to access that information at a very simple way. And so last, certainly but not least, is real-time data. So when we talk about data, the availability of that data for modern architecture enables data to be updated instantaneously. So in some cases, what you have with a more older or legacy-driven system, all of these benefits that we shared in cloud-native solutions have been a bit of a challenge. So before we jump to the next slide, I'd love to get, Scott, maybe you can give us some feedback from the benefits of cloud-native solutions and how being a Tekion user, where you may have seen some of these benefits from working with the system yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Padram. Appreciate it. You bring up great points, from data fragmentation, which has been sort of my pet project for 10 plus years, trying to find ways to minimize that data fragmentation or reduce the number of silos that our data is in because of the different products that we might want to use on a daily basis, whether it's service scheduling or some form of another marketing tool or whatever it is. It's very difficult as a dealer to keep all of those balls in the air. The integrations break, the idea of separate data, even though it's the same car, it's stored in two different places, or the same customer is stored in multiple places. We've seen the real benefit just in the last 5 months of being on Tekion of getting more and more and more of the data brought into one place, eliminating a lot of spreadsheets and eliminating all of that duplicate entry in a lot of areas.
Yeah, and that's excellent. And in regards to continuous development and instant deployment, since you've been on the system, how would you gauge the level of deployment of innovation in the last 5 months being on the platform?
Well, it's exciting. It's almost like pick your favorite gift-giving holiday, whether it's Christmas or otherwise, and it's almost like Christmas comes every month, because every month there's a fairly major release with some new functionality that, of course, everybody gets excited about. And so I find myself reading the release notes, getting excited even sort of the week before that release happens, so that we're ready for it, talking about it amongst the team and making sure that the people that need to know what functionality is coming. And in fact, this morning there was a release that I got kind of excited about. It's something that I've been asking about for a while. So I'm really, or not a while, but for a month or so. So I'm very excited to see that. And just to say, I think over the time we've been a Tekion customer, we've seen that sort of deployment cadence happen. What we talked about during the demo process is actually what's happening. So it's exciting, and it's fun to see the new functionality coming up.
Awesome. Well, that's great, and I think we've heard that a lot, right? To your point, pick a gift-giving holiday, and that seems to be, it resonates with a lot of our dealers that they're truly excited about on a month-to-month basis to have that level of innovation. So that's fantastic. And it actually kind of dovetails well to some market trends that we're seeing. So, I'm sure most of you on the call today, we all recognize that there are some new entrants that have come to the market. And, what we've said is that technology companies are now becoming car dealers. And so now car dealers need to become technology companies. And I think what you mentioned, Scott, makes a lot of sense, right? That it's great in a sense that we have a company that is not only innovative for today, but to help future-proof your business. That the reality is, certainly as a franchise dealer, you have significant competitive advantages over these types of competitors. However, the reality is that these companies are also unencumbered from some debt that being able to build with technology stacks that enable them to potentially deliver a very seamless and improved customer experience. And so we thought it was important to kind of highlight that, we used to think we were competing with, the brand that was across the street that wasn't our brand. But I think something that we'd like to invoke thought about is that how do we now compete with brands that don't necessarily have direct competition with us, but are potentially trying to make way into a market that we know enables them to grow. So, Scott, curious from your perspective, how would you say Tekion has enabled you, right, to potentially be able to defend around market trends in the future with the technology you've been able to use in our system?
Well, one of the interesting things, in talking about this is the competition, who the competition is, and often we were our own competition, right? So internally, between our software systems and our training and our processes, we were creating a system, a purchase experience that had a lot of friction in it, and friction is one of the maybe overused buzzwords now in this space to describe the process, but it's really true. And what held us back for a really long time, despite wanting to do a better job for our customers and wanting to make the experience more streamlined, we had a real challenge with software. And so between the different softwares we were using to talk to the customer, then to put the customer into some form of CRM, appraise the person's car, work the deal, do the paperwork, do the follow-up. All of these are different systems in a lot of cases. And so we really had trouble executing on that. You talked about at the beginning onboarding employees and all of these systems that you have to onboard people in, and where we fall short always gives our customers the bad experience. When we can't get all that training done and when it's not seamless to the employee, it's also not seamless to the customer. So I think that's one of the benefits we've seen is that Tekion is coming at it, I think, from a customer's point of view, not just the dealer's point of view, and trying to find ways to improve the customer experience. And so for us, that's been helpful. It lines up with our core values and our goals to do a better job in that area. And so far, it's really helping.
That's excellent, and I'm glad you see it that way. And I think that's a really missed topic point, right? The onboarding and being able to also source potentially from new avenues of opportunities, and really I think having a partner who's looking at it from a customer lens enables you to be able to defend future market trends as well. So that's wonderful. One thing we talked about we were going to discuss was the value of data. And this is a great slide that we found from Deloitte's research from data-driven organizations that we found 61% of those companies with less strong analytics cultures only exceeded 22% of the time exceeded their business goals in the last 12 months. But we found 39% of the companies with the strongest analytics cultures were able to deliver double that. So 48% of the time they significantly were able to exceed business goals in the past in the 12 months. So certainly the value of data we know is here. Scott, being on the system, trying to really knowing the complexity of managing a dealership, you've got 4 businesses within one. Certainly you have a financial statement that's always been complex and developed by the manufacturer for one need. How have you been able to leverage the value of data since being on our platform?
Well, again, one of the really sort of drivers in making this decision was the analytics product, and there's no shortage of data in a car dealership, right? It's in a lot of different places. So many of us we're members of an NADA 20 group. There's other people that are buying all sorts of analytics software that then has to integrate with whatever the DMS is. But for us, I guess the point I'm trying to make is we've always been data-driven. The difficulty has been in getting that data in a digestible format that everybody on the team could ingest their piece of it and understand it. And so what we're seeing, in fact, just this morning, I spent time with our parts and service director looking at the dashboard going, okay, what are we doing about this, and this? And wow, this is really exciting here, and here. And so I think given a very simple line of sight into our data has really changed 2 things. One is we don't waste a lot of time looking at things that are working well. We don't have to spend a lot of time to figure out that they're working well. And we can very quickly see when things are not where we want them to be. We can very quickly identify those at a high level and then drill deeper into it. And we also, I don't know if you want me to go into things like we were downloading spreadsheets, and we are data and trying to put it into a spreadsheet, and the amount of cleanup that had to take place in order to get to that, to again make it digestible, is very difficult to do on a regular basis. I mean, it always seems in every dealership, no matter how many people work there, we're short-staffed. If there's 25 or 125 or 225, there's not more people than you need to do these tasks. And so it always bothered me. It's always bothered me that why am I doing something that the computer should be doing? The computer's really good at this. Why am I doing it?
Sure. No, I think those are excellent points. And I think we're going to touch on some of those things a little later on in regards to what are the 5 key value points of the system. You and I early on, too, we talked a lot about, you've been a data-driven culture. But I think for most of us, we realize, being a data-driven culture is a combination of discipline and organization. It's not just a technology system, right? I'm certain that majority of folks maybe on the call today, they're probably the net consumers of complex spreadsheets and having tons of information, to your point. Certainly dealers are not lacking any data, but how can we help accomplish a data-driven culture? And so we felt that these 5 critical areas of trust, commitment, metrics, data literacy, and training were very important. And I want to start with trust because, this was something that, started our relationship. And trust is an important principle of any data-driven company, right? And all parts of the companies, from managers all the way to the executives, they have to trust that the data is accurate and reliable. And ultimately, we've got to be good data stewards as well. And so, of course, throughout the company, if we empower people with data, but they don't trust the data, then certainly they're not going to work with it. And I'm sure through your experience, there's probably been times where, those multitude of products you've had in your platform before, all it took was for some of those data points not to align, and you had broken trust. How has trust really been some part of your data-driven culture on your side, Scott?
Well, again, I think you put it perfectly, as if managers don't trust the data, or if it's different than what anybody else expected, whether it's them or someone else, then it gives people either an excuse, a reason, or a hiding place, and to say, oh, that's not right. So, and then of course you chase that rabbit for an hour, and then the meeting's over, and you didn't accomplish anything. So one of the things that you and I spoke a lot when we first got to know each other, Padram, was that if we don't trust the data, it doesn't help us move the ball. And so we spent a lot of time you convincing me that this data was accurate, and we went down each one of those rabbit holes, and we made sure that the data was accurate. And so even my most skeptical managers now have a level of trust in the data. And so, in fact, the meeting I was in this morning with my fixed ops director was, all right, out of these 5 things, which ones do we absolutely believe, and which ones are we skeptical about? And there were none that he was skeptical of. He said, no, we just have to do a better job. And so, that to me is really managing the business and not the data. We spent way too much time managing the data and not managing the business. We're experts at running the car dealership. We're not data scientists. I have a son that's a data scientist. I'm not a data scientist. So, and he likes to point that out for me. So I think that, for us, just being able to quickly see a color-coded dashboard with high-level metrics that you can drill down into, that any tool you want to use should do that for you. It shouldn't be so hard, and it doesn't need to be that hard.
Sure. Yeah, and the areas that we also see sometimes broken with trust too, Scott, is that you have data delays, right? We've had some dealers experience, in my days on some reporting platforms, it would take 6 to 8 hours for my information to update in my analytics product. And so what we're really proud of course, again, going back to having a cloud-native solution, is almost real-time data, near real-time data. How have you seen that? Have you seen the benefits of having that instantaneous data sync that we continuously update?
It's just amazing. I mean, that's maybe, can I have more than one favorite thing? that's one of the one of my favorites is that, we have a situation where we have a person in the office who is out on out on leave. And so my daughter, who's just coming off maternity leave, who's the general manager, was filling in for her before she went out. And so now there wasn't a person to post car deals that day. So I'm looking at analytics going, why are we off here? And so I look at the car deals and they're all posted. I could quickly go in and post car deals, believe it or not. It's so easy that I can do it. And so go in and post car deals, and they are immediately reflected in analytics so that I know where I am for that day. It's just to me, that's really, that's hugely powerful. So whether you wait for your office staff to do it at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. or whatever it is, first off, it doesn't take them 15 minutes to post a car deal or 5 minutes or however long it took us in a previous system. But it immediately is reflected in the data that I can look at and then address as I should.
Wow, that's excellent. And it's great to hear that. I don't know too many dealer principals that can actually post a deal. So that's certainly a testament to the simplicity of the system.
Yeah, it's not about me. It's not me. It's the system is really just that easy. In fact, I had to teach myself to do it, and I was very surprised. I was like, well, I must be missing something. So I made a phone call to a team member over at Tekion today. I think I'm I'm missing something. He said, no, that's really all there is. And I went, wow, that's crazy.
And I think you touched on this too, right? So commitment, right? Building a data-driven culture can't be a set-it-and-forget-it process. I think commitment, of course, is difficult to derive without trust. So I hope everyone can appreciate why we really start with trust, because it's the foundation to really being able to have participation. And it sounds like from the meetings that you're having, Scott, the utilization of the system, that this culture that you've really built started with trust, which has now led to commitment. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's true in every relationship you have, whether it's with your DMS or your data or your significant other. If there's no trust, the commitment is eroded. And so many times we ask for a commitment before we actually have earned the trust. And not to overplay that, but I think it is done in our business in many different ways. But we, as a manager, as a senior manager, a lot of times we expect people to just trust the data, and sometimes the data is wrong, and often the data is wrong, and so it erodes your trust on multiple levels. So, yeah, I think asking for commitment is a heck of a lot easier if the data is trustworthy.
That's a good point. The other thing is, too, we believe metrics, right? So, here we kind of parentheses this a little bit with metrics that matter, right? A lot of the times I think that one of the things we've all struggled with is having too many things to measure, right? That certainly we can't measure 100 things. We need to be able to condense it to the top 10 or top 5 most important things, which I really like the way that you put that earlier. How have you been able to use, our product, and even from a cultural perspective, that condensing the focus of the data to metrics that matter? Have you felt that the metrics that we've put in front, would it reference to the metrics that matter and are in line with helping you achieve your business objectives? Because I think that's a really important thing for our audience to know.
Well, so often, it's interesting, so often we get ourselves convinced that one thing's important. We get the factories throwing hundreds of metrics at us saying, we need you to manage these 200 things. And of course, we all know that's not possible. But then we turn around and do it to our own people and go, hey, we need you to manage these 200 things. And those are 200 different things than the 200 the factory gave. So now there's 400 things. So, and I'm exaggerating a little bit just to make a point, but what we found is simplifying things has made it so much more powerful. And it's interesting that coincidentally, about a year ago, we put the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, in to run our business. And 6 months after that, we were installing Tekion, and there was like this really interesting alignment between the EOS philosophy and Tekion's philosophy of simplifying things. And so for our culture, it has really resonated really well, and we find that we can do we're managing the important things in all parts of our business, whether it's the metrics we're watching in Tekion, or whether it's the other things that we're managing through our EOS system. So it's really, I mean, it's basic business is that you have to manage the important things, but it's so easy to get distracted and running down these rabbit holes, which I'm good at.
Oh, absolutely.
You know I'm very good at that.
It is. Absolutely. But, it's one of those challenges, right? It's trying to stay focused, right? So I think that's definitely a major piece of the puzzle, right? And then, of course, look, data literacy, as we find, is another big one. I think we take this for granted sometimes. The data that we look at, we assume that everybody is looking at this information. So I think really from a cultural perspective, really making sure that everybody understands adjusting to working with data means changing the way we operate in our day-to-day activities. Now, this may mean that the people that we're working with, you've said it best. You said, hey, look, I'm not a data scientist, and I don't think dealers need to be data scientists. But I do think that in order to get our folks to really buy into trust, commitment, making sure that they have the metrics that matter, there's going to be times where we're essentially, making sure that they understand, do they understand the definitions of things? And I think data literacy is something that I can tell you drive in your business. How have you kind of helped support data literacy? And I know it might not be a technology thing, but how do you currently help your teammates understand data literacy?
Well, by being transparent. I mean, so often in the car business, and I learned this at a very young age. I'm second generation dealer. I've been around the car business for a long time now. I hate to even admit how long. But my father's generation were very, very secretive about the way, about a lot of parts of the business, very siloed, and it only shared what absolutely had to be shared with people in order to get their job done. And so what we found is the more we share with people, the more committed they are, the more they trust us, and the more we can work on their data literacy or any literacy, their business literacy. So the more they understand about our business and then about the data, the more they can do and the more capable they become and the more fulfilled they become. So, the way we've done it through Tekion is we recently, all of the senior managers had access to their own analytics dashboard, but we recently gave all those same people the executive dashboard, so they see the entire operation. The kimono is wide open, and people can look at whatever they want to look at. But to your point about data literacy, and to your point about just people understanding what terminology, what these words mean, when we have a managers meeting, or we call it a leadership team meeting, everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows what the other person's talking about. So the fixed ops guy doesn't check out of the meeting while we're talking about the sales department. The sales department doesn't check out while the fixed ops people are having their piece of the meeting. So, it really takes a team to run a modern car dealership. And I think if we're committed to making the experience good for the customer, great for the customer, then we have to break down those barriers between these departments and information and literacy about each other's businesses is important.
Yeah, and I think, moving to training, which I think this is a really critical step of the deployment of any type of technology, or in this particular case, from a data, perspective of building a culture around, this is the final and probably fifth and most powerful step, right? That certainly as we've gone through from making sure that we have trust and commitment and metrics that matter, and we have data literacy, but it all comes together with training. And time and time again, what we've seen is we acquire software, we bought it through a phenomenal demo, or someone gave a great presentation, and then we get saddled with it, we get it thrown in our environment, and the training is really kind of dependent on us just navigating through it. So we know that training is a very important one. And instead of just riddling the system from a perspective of just, certainly as much knowledge as we can put into a training book, one of the most valuable things we find is the one-to-one human connection of having somebody that can walk you through the system. So love to hear from you from a training perspective. Onboarding on our system, I think, is very important for most people to hear, because for me personally, but going from one DMS to another, one of the biggest concerns I had was the training itself, right? And so whether it's the DMS, whether it's been the analytics product, would love to get your perspective on, how has training helped support the conclusion of your business in regards to how you've been able to drive the results? How has that been for you?
Well, people shouldn't be asked to do their job without knowing what they're supposed to be doing, right? So in previous life, I spent almost 20 years as an airline pilot. And, when you were going to go fly airplanes around, they didn't just throw you the keys and say, well, you'll figure that out. They actually had a very rigid training program that included both, ground school training, simulator training, and then actually in-airplane training. I would say, I don't know if there's aviators over there in Tekion's training department, but I would say that it takes a similar path to aviation training in the sense that, there's a lot of upfront work that's done to identify the gaps in the system versus the system that you would be coming off of, then building processes around those gaps. Then there's data conversion and simulated, they actually call it sim training or simulated training, where they take your data and you actually train your people. And I was very impressed with the idea that we did end-to-end training a week before our go live. We did end-to-end training with our own data. I've never seen that before. So what I mean by end-to-end training is you had a technician, a service writer, and a parts guy in the room, all in the same room, and they would take a customer from right up to the technician doing the inspection, to the parts guy getting the parts request, back to the service advisor, back to the tech, and completed the whole circle so that everybody, and they did that multiple times, a lot of times, so everybody had muscle memory in the system. And I just never, that's before go live. And then you do the go live week. I've never seen the level of training and then the level of support as you go live. The size of the team matters. I've never seen that large of a training team before. So, I would say just generally that the design of the training matters, and the quality of the people that they send to your store matters. So, we were very pleased with the way that went.
That's excellent. We know that that's a major sore spot, right? We know that certainly acquiring technology is fantastic, but the support to the technology is even more vital because it's the utilization that we're all after. One thing that we also
can't get any of that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You just can't get you can't get to utilization if you can't write an RO. You can't get to utilization and efficiency if your people cannot print a car deal in the F&I office. You can't get to all of the good stuff if you can't even do the basics. And so that's the real shortcoming in a lot of cases. The basics can't even be completed.
No, it's an excellent point. And I think to that point, too, going back to trust, right, all these different components, there's many of us who've watched our employees not know how to operate the system, and it's the famous garbage in, garbage out, right? I think so. Protecting things such as data integrity, to making sure that the training was done appropriately to start with, and that it's easy enough for folks to use it, I think is really important. One of the things, and you touched on this, Scott, which I would certainly put you in the best operators category, but what we saw, one of the big challenges that really what we want to make sure that our audience takes away from this is that, driving a data-driven system to achieve objectives, what we found is that most goals, objectives, and KPI awareness, it typically resides at the top, right? Certainly a lot of executives sit on top of this data. It's coveted by them, of course, because it's their workflow. But the bottom line is, as you can see over to the left side of this screen, we only have a handful of executives. We have one general manager, a couple of department leaders, and we have more of a frontline team than anywhere else. And it's great to hear that you've really empowered everybody in the store, to be able to look at, full transparency. And I'm sure you've seen the benefit of it. But this is one thing that we really encourage, and we really, I think from a walkaway perspective, is that when you empower people to look at something that was built for executives all the way downwards to the front line, sometimes the mistake is when you build executive-driven applications is that there's a tremendous amount of complexity because the executives are already in this type of a workflow. How has your team adopted the utilization of looking at various data points in Tekion and understanding quickly, oh, I know what I need to do? Or do you feel that they're struggling constantly with, well, I see all this information, but I'm not clear on what it is that I need to do? I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Well, that's always a work in progress, right? I don't think you're ever finished with that. And so
Sure.
we started with a crawl, walk, run sort of mentality to that, where we exposed a smaller amount, got everybody comfortable with that smaller amount, and then added onto it as we went along. And so, I think that also involving them so many times, forecasts and all this other stuff are set in a vacuum and then dropped on somebody to say, okay, now implement that or make sure that happens. And so we do the forecasting with the individual that's responsible for that area of the business. So fixed ops director handles that for parts and service. So we work together to develop the forecast through our analytics tool. And so we get a lot of one-on-one time to work through what do these things mean, and so we get a baseline of understanding, and we're all on the same page. And I understand their challenges, and they understand what we're trying to accomplish, and it really puts us on the same page, and it really makes us a team rather than top-down direction on both the forecast, but also on the consumption of the information or the data as it comes back.
Awesome. Now just to kind of really maybe touch on the 5 key values to unlocking the potential of your data. Think of this as also a different approach. We talked about some of the 5 key areas of building the discipline or the culture, I would say, of a data-driven organization. But throughout the discussion, what I really enjoyed from what you shared, Scott, which aligns to some of the goals that we try to make sure for anyone on our audience members that tries to understand that we felt that managing your business from a data perspective requires simplicity. And it takes more effort to simplify something than it is to make it complex. So one of the 5 key values that we start to talk about is simple. You have to have a system that's simple enough. And we joke and say, look, if it takes longer than 15 to 30 seconds to know what to do or spot an issue, it's the wrong tool or product. And this is a very important area that we see continuously missed. What we have are engineer experts, data scientists, as Scott put it earlier, who never served in a day of the problem and have now been put into a situation of building a technology. But the bottom line, I think, is that we need to make sure that the tool is not only simple, but it is relevant. And so that's a really important area of the business that we kind of invoke. And I think that, Scott, you mentioned this numerous times throughout the discussion. Hopefully it's the simplicity that is aligned with your previous business objectives that has let your team achieve their objectives. But would just love to maybe get a quick bite on how have you found the simplicity of the system to help you unlock the potential of your data?
Well, I think the simplicity of the system to unlock our data is one thing. I mean, simplicity is the mantra, I think, at Tekion, because all through the application, it's simple to open a repair order. It's simple to make a service appointment. It's simple to write a part slip. Simple, as I described earlier, to post a car deal. Or to work in schedules. Simplicity is throughout the application. But the simplicity at the data level, I think, where it speaks to me is I'm looking at, let's say I'm looking at something in analytics that triggers me to go look at the financial statement, and then I can drill down on the financial statement all the way to what I'll just call the source document. Way down deep into the transaction. And, the amount of time that otherwise you have to spend, and if you're in the source document, you can also, or somewhere on your way to the source document, you can open an inquiry tool to go, to a different place in accounting to check something. And so the amount of time that I previously would have to spend if I was going to do that was inordinate. I mean, the amount of, you'd kick those things back over to the accounting office and go, okay, can you find out what's going on with this, or can you tell me what's happening with that? I no longer have to do that. I can make those inquiries myself and solve that problem right now in my mind, at least, solve the data question. And then if it's an issue, I'll address it with the appropriate party rather than involving people and then eventually maybe getting an answer, maybe not getting an answer, maybe forgetting about it, and then moving on with my life. So I think that's the value of the simplicity, is that it will allow me to get down to the level of the answer, but it starts at a level where it brings my attention to the problems in a more efficient way. Is that what you were asking about?
Oh, 100%. And I think simple and efficient go hand in hand with each other, right? Is that, to your point earlier, Scott, we want a system that, of course, is simplicity in design, that enables you to just naturally browse information. And the more accessibility you have, the easier it is for you to get to information. You spend less time exporting data. You brought it up on the earlier part of the call. You mentioned, and I'm sure everybody on this call has, mounds and mounds of spreadsheets that they continuously download. And I think one thing we probably don't pay attention to is the amount of time it takes for us to analyze, interpret, stage, and distribute that information. So I think efficiency is very important. The other thing, too, and we touched on this earlier, is real-time and detailed information. And I love how you naturally kind of mentioned that, I may see an item that is a concern for me at the top layer, and making sure that in order to unlock data is that we have to let you drive directly to the source, whether that is getting to the very final detail of the financial statement, or maybe it's the granularity of the RO, right? That if we spot an RO that's got an issue or a deal number that's got an issue, there is certainly the needle in the haystack strategy. And so driving to the very bottom, I think, is really important. And we touched on real time. And I'm glad you're seeing the benefits of the ability to detail dive into information, because it really does. It empowers you to be able to have good, relevant conversations right then and there. I love that you said, look, we don't have to worry about having a future conversation. And I think these are things that we see. The fourth item that we think that is extremely important, too, is an objective-driven model. You touched on this earlier. You involve your management teams. How has the objective-driven model really helped your business, Scott?
Well, I think I sort of probably jumped it a little bit earlier when I was talking about, setting those objectives, or we're setting those objectives together as a team, not in a vacuum where I have a spreadsheet and I send that off to somebody and then they have whatever reaction they have to it and then tell me, oh yeah, sure, we can do that. So we're setting them together on real data. So we're any tool you use to set objectives should give you the opportunity to look at last month, 3-month average, year to date, different ways to analyze how you want to set the upcoming month's objective. And I'm sure people on the call have spent hours and hours and hours trying to figure out how to set objectives for the year, the quarter, the month. All kinds of time was buried in that. And I'm guilty of spending that time and still not completing the task, not having something that people could buy into. Where this objective-driven model, we're able to agree on the most important metrics and then kick the month off and come back to them all month long and determine whether or not we're on pace, off pace. We don't need to go even any further than that, other than to say on track, off track, before we know that we have something we have to address. And very often, I don't even have to raise it. They bring it up themselves. So I think that's been really, really big for us.
That's excellent. And to finish us off here is certainly we need to make sure that we have mobility access, right? And mobility has been one of the big things. As we all today, almost every one of the attendees, I'm sure, has their mobile device sitting right next to them. So we know that accessibility of a system being driven through mobile is extremely important. And knowing that today, unfortunately, emails aren't looked at all the time. And, one thing for us is that we know that text messages have about an open rate of 99.7% compared to emails at about 50%. And so Would love to have you finish us off here, Scott, with how the mobile maybe, features such as a text notification that simply gives you some guidance on where your business is. How has that been able to unlock the power of your data?
Well, I was just trying to pull up quickly my unread emails, and I will tell you that somebody once asked me, well, I'm trying to make this point that you just made, that 99 point something, very high percent of text messages are read, and something much, much less than that of emails are read. I had, at the time, I think I had 150,000 unread emails at the time the guy asked me about it, and I think I'm north of 600,000 unread emails at this point. But text messages, I don't have any right now, unread text messages. So I get two text messages a day from Tekion telling me where I am against my forecast and what I did for the day. And so I can very quickly take a look at that and go, okay, we're either on track, off track, and then later on either in the evening or when I get to work in the morning, I can dive deeper into that. But it's a daily reminder to stay in the business on those types of issues. The pace, if you manage the pace all month long, it's amazing how you actually achieve the goals you set at the beginning of the month if they were rational goals to begin with. So it helps tremendously.
That's fantastic. Well, really appreciate it as always. Hopefully for the audience, they've got some good key walkaways that certainly building a data-driven system, it revolves around a culture and certainly having a technology stack that can support the 5 key items that we talked about. David, I'll pass it over to you. I think we've got some questions that we can answer for some folks on the audience, and we can help wrap up post our questions.
All right. Thank you, Pedram. Thank you, Scott. And we can go live now, too, with Doug, if you'd like to activate your webcam for the Q&A time. Let's go with this one. How does Tekion sync the data? Can you import data from other systems into Tekion for reporting?
Excellent question. So how does Tekion sync the data? So one of the great things is the fact that when we are a DMS system that's incorporated with our actual analytics product, there is no data sync because it's actually built into our system. So there is not a sync that's necessarily required. But in some workflows, for example, we do let the user simply click a button to say, I'd like my data refreshed. We did that to just protect workflows as people are looking at information. Importing data from other systems into Tekion is kind of an interesting question. I think that may be coming from, if majority of us have been used to having so many fragmented suites of technology, we're trying to figure out how do we bring that information in. In most cases, we've found very small, if seldom, if any, requirements of importing data into Tekion. One area that we know is very important to our dealers is from an OEM perspective data set. There, as Scott put it, there's lots of data points that the OEM wants us to measure. So we are currently in strong partnership with each one of the OEMs that we've built relationships with, where we would be able to ingest certain data points. But at the moment, we haven't found a strong need to continue to import data in for Tekion, just because we seem to be able to deliver the most critical business requirements that dealers need for their existing system.
All right. Well, I think in the interest of time here, we should probably jump over and wrap this up. We're about 3 minutes to. Outstanding presentation. Boy, that was good back and forth, Pedram, between you and Scott. Really appreciate that. I think it was very informative. I'm sure helpful to all the participants and users here today. If any of you folks are interested in a copy of the webinar presentation, it'll be available in an MP4 file probably within the next 24, 36 hours, and we can get that to you. It will also be made available on our website at strategicsource.com. If you're not currently a client of Strategic Source, but are interested in our services, please reach out to us at sales@strategicsource.com or give Chris Austin, our Executive Vice President of Marketing and Sales, a call, 612-386-3898. Keep an eye out for, there is a library of webinars on our website for, I think, the other 11 webinars that we've done since June, ranging from utilities to credit card processing to shop supplies. So there are a lot of very informative, very good presentations there that can help you. But I want to take this chance again to thank Pedram and Scott today. Thanks very much. And I'll turn it over to Dave.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Pedram and Scott. I have brought up a post-session survey slide for everyone to give their feedback. Just a couple questions. You spent an hour with us. We'd love to get your feedback on the time spent, and it makes us better. That will wrap it up for today. We appreciate everyone's time, and we look forward to you joining us on future webinars with Strategic Source. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.